Hello and welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Karen Essex, author of the novel Cleopatra, as well as many other titles that we'll get into a bit in the interview. Karen, hi.
Hi, good morning.
So start off maybe with a little context. Tell us about Cleopatra. She's obviously become a part of culture, maybe a part of pop culture, but who is she really? What do readers need to know about who she is historically?
Well, who she is historically is exactly why I wrote the book, because the Cleopatra who lived and ruled has nothing to do with the Cleopatra that has been handed down to us in popular culture. The whole time I was growing up, I thought Cleopatra was Elizabeth Taylor, because of that movie. And I assumed along with the rest of the world that Cleopatra had heaving bosoms and was a seductress. And then years later, cut to, I'm an adult, and I was reading lots of women's history and lots of academic women's history, and I learned that the real Cleopatra had nothing to do with this image of a woman who just seduced two great Roman men and was responsible for their downfall. In reality, she was utterly brilliant. She spoke 9 or 10 languages, and this was recorded by Plutarch. She was a brilliant ruler who had survived all kinds of treachery from within her own family to rise to the throne, and she was able to keep Egypt for a very long time unconquered by Rome. She was a great diplomat and et cetera, et cetera. So I just felt like this is a great injustice to women everywhere, to have this woman's real personality and abilities and accomplishments put aside, and we just think of her as this beautiful creature who seduced men, when in fact she wasn't even beautiful.
So I'm interested to know more about how you told this story because as you just described, what we see in Cleopatra, played by Elizabeth Taylor, is not the real history. So you must have done a lot of research to figure out some of the more real, authentic history behind her and her reign. But we still have a story to tell. There's a reason her story's been dramatized. So how did you balance those elements?
Well, when it comes to research, I'm a little bit insane and I really do indulge myself. So, I'm a well-educated person, but when I started learning about the ancient world that Cleopatra lived in, that's the very specific Greco-Roman Egyptian era, which has nothing to do with the ancient pharaohs. I realized that I wasn't, I just had this sort of schoolgirl knowledge. And so I dove deep. I actually enrolled in an interdisciplinary graduate program at Vanderbilt University. So, I mean, I researched it so I could study with the right scholars, and I did that. And so after I did years of academic research, I decided to go walk in Cleopatra's footsteps. I went to Egypt, Greece, Rome, Turkey, trying to go to all the places that she had actually been. And after about 7 years of informing myself that way, I wrote a massive historical outline and then proceeded to write the book. So it's a very, very difficult process and a very hard thing to balance because, of course, you want to dump all your information onto the readers, but you begin to realize that your readers don't want to go to graduate school. They just want they just want to learn something and be entertained and edified. And so I actually then enrolled in another graduate program because I had been working as a journalist, and my prose had become very, boring, really. Like Cleopatra, the 39-year-old, dark-haired ruler. It sounded like that. So I decided to get an MFA in writing and studied with all these amazing writers and poets and dramatists, and they really helped me to cut the fat of my research and tell a really, I think, lyrical, exciting narrative. So that's been my endless Cleopatra journey.
Well, kudos to you. One thing I love hearing from historical fiction authors is all the work that goes into it. It's not just looking up a few YouTube videos and a few Wikipedia articles, grad school twice and all the travel, just to go into that book that somebody might read in 10 hours or so. I mean, I think that's great that you put all that effort into it because it'll show up on the page and readers don't always know just how much goes into that. But I'm curious to know more about that process for you because the book was originally published in 2001, and at this point in your life, you've established yourself as a career storyteller. You have so many credentials, but I'm sure back then maybe you knew less about where your path was going. So was it just like a personal passion that it started out as? How did you push yourself through the uncertainty of it?
All I can say is I'm crazy. I really don't know. I mean, in retrospect, when I think about all the risks I took, because I wasn't alone. I was a single mother of a very young daughter, and it took tremendous risks and invested so much money in doing this. And it started out with me thinking. I had some very successful writers in my social circle, and so I watched them and their process, and I saw how deeply seriously they took what they were doing. So, I had those role models, people like James Elroy and Michael Gilmore and Steve Erickson. I was hanging out with them, and so they influenced me a lot. Bruce Feiler. Um, but um, but also you can't do this thing if you aren't driven by your own passion. I think a lot of people, I meet all the time retired history teachers who come to my readings and stuff or get a hold of me and they want to write these books. And even for them, the process is so daunting that the books never actually, in most cases, get written. So I think it's a combination of just intention and personal. I mean, if you aren't driven to do this, you're not going to do it. I think the only reason to ever write any book is because you cannot live with yourself unless you get that story out of you. That's me anyway.
Oh, so let's talk about where you are now. You're re-releasing it. Can you tell us a little bit about the publication the first time around versus the second time around? What's changed and why it's being re-released?
Well, first of all, I want to make clear there are two books. Cleopatra, The Early Years is the first, it's a two-volume novel. And so the first novel is about her life before she ever met Julius Caesar or Mark Antony. Because in my research, I found that, wow, her early story was absolutely riveting and harrowing. And I wanted to tell that story because nobody ever tells it. The history treats her like, oh, she was born the moment she met Julius Caesar. So that was book one. And then book two, Pharaoh, tells the rest of the story. So that's, it's a two-volume novel. And in the first publishing process, I will tell you the good news is that after all those graduate programs, my agent sold the book over the weekend that I graduated from getting my MFA. So that was wonderful. But in the first process, it was a major publisher and I had zero power. And now I'm reissuing them myself and I have all the power, which also means I have all the responsibility. So it's a completely different process. And actually, it's given me more respect for the mainstream publishers. I've always been published by, the big five, Doubleday, Hachette, Grand Central, but then having to do it all myself and realizing, my goodness, the kind of care that goes into this and the preparation and the marketing and the buildup and the money that that one has to spend, just the minimal money to get something published is it's all considerable. So it's been a very big learning process.
Well, it is fascinating to hear you go from the big five to being independent, because most independent authors look up to authors published by the big five and think, oh, that's my goal. Obviously, as you pointed out, there are some advantages and disadvantages to both. Can you speak to a little bit more what those advantages, like why it's worth it for you to leave that big five world and do it yourself, although you've had to learn a lot along the way? What's been so great about it that you can point independent authors right now and say it's not so bad?
Well, if we were back in the early 2000s and someone told me they wanted to self-publish, I would say, well, that's silly. Don't be a sad person. Just give your book a chance. But everything has changed, Colin. Everything has changed in publishing. Ebooks came in and changed everything, but more than that, this kind of democratization of technology, anyone can publish a book, and so consequently, anyone does. I mean, I think I could be wrong about the figure, but I think that Amazon alone has 40 million books on its site. And so breaking through that noise is almost impossible if you don't know what you're doing. So publishing, traditional publishing, mainstream publishing is, in my opinion, complete disarray. My agent, longtime, wonderful, very powerful, smart, respected agent, told me that it is in such disarray that she's being ghosted by people that she has known for 25 years in publishing. I know a lot of best-selling authors who can't get an agent right now, much less a publisher. So I think publishing doesn't quite know what it is doing or what it wants. We've just been through this lengthy period where, they, and rightfully, wanted to give voice to, minority voices, people who have traditionally not had their voices or stories recognized. And so we've been through that, with, I guess, a sort of, I don't know, I don't have the figures, but now publishing, they're trying to sort of sell more books. And so they've sort of gone the way of Hollywood tentpole movies, which is they want all the James Patterson they can get. And, so at this point in mainstream publishing, if you can sell 2 million books, you're golden. If you can sell 40,000 books, you're ignored. So most of us sell 40, 50, 60,000 books. No, I'm sorry, not most of us, but many of us, are used to going out and selling that amount of books. But now that's not really, nobody wants those people really because we don't make enough money for them. So I still have an agent and I have a new book coming out that I'm going to self-publish by choice. It has not been seen by anyone, but I feel like I'm going to give my book the best shot I can give it. Whereas my agent can spend a year shopping it around, and it may or may not get picked up. And if it gets picked up, it'll be published 2 or 3 years in the future. So I don't know. I really have enjoyed taking control of my own life. And, as a sort of last detail, I'll mention that, if you're publishing your own books, the profits are yours. If you are publishing through a mainstream publisher, um, they are taking 90% of your money. So, there's that too to consider.
Well, I'm really glad I asked you that question. I can think of some people specifically that I think will be very edifying for them to hear what you've been talking about. And as a publisher myself, I struggle with some of those things because I'm trying to stay in business, but I want to respect the author, their art, and make sure that they're making money off of their work as well. So I think it's really fascinating what you say about publishing right now, not really knowing where it is and where it's going. And I think it's been disillusioning for a lot of authors that have query letters, that have agents and manuscripts that are trying to sell, and they don't have it, not finding a place to land it with.
I just want to say to all those authors out there who either they're being, ghosted by agents or ghosted by publishers, it's not you. I mean, I'm in a fiction writers co-op, and every single one of us, 50 people, have been on bestseller lists. And when I tell you our struggles right now are the same as your struggles, we're talking to our agents and publishers, and they're telling us, or they're not speaking to us at all. So, if you're not getting responses, it's not necessarily it could be your book. It could be that you are not appealing to a mass audience, or you haven't done the best job you can do. But on the other hand, if you have really done your best and you have beta readers who tell you, this is terrific, and you've had it professionally edited, and people are reading your book and liking it, and you're not getting any response out there in the publishing world, it's probably not you right now. It's them. 20 years ago, I would have said, it's you. Get professional, get help, write better. But now it's not you.
Well, let's talk more about your diversity of talents. You write screenplays, you're in film production. Give us a little bit more background into yourself as a storyteller beyond just the historical fiction novels that we're talking about now.
Well, I started off in film, and I love film and TV. It's a medium that I think is just fascinating and has only gotten better over my lifetime. We've lived through the golden age of television, and I think that's where a lot of the great writing has gone. So I actually began as a screenwriter, and then segued into novel writing and writing short stories and prose. So that's been my trajectory. I wrote my two Cleopatra books after having worked a bit as a screenwriter, and they were so hard for me to do that I thought, oh, I'm never going to write a novel again until I'm very old and I can't really leave my wheelchair. That's the time to sit in a room by yourself and write books. But as as life would have it, I had published the Cleopatra books, and I'd gone back to screenwriting, and I was writing the great saga of the Hawaiian people about King Kamehameha for Sony Pictures. And I was lying on the floor of my office at home, and I saw this book on the shelf that I had bought when I was in college, and I never looked at it. It was a book about Leonardo da Vinci, and I thought, oh, I'm so tired. I'd just gotten back from Hawaii, pulled the book off the shelf, started reading it, and it was about these four fascinating women who were muses of Leonardo and who were also all mistresses, wives, whatever, of the Duke of Milan. And I thought, Well, this is a fascinating story for some some novelist. Not me, of course. But as life, had it, I became entranced with that story, and so I finished my saga of King Kamehameha, which sadly was never made by Sony Pictures, which is a story in itself. But and then I wrote Leonardo's Swans, which turned out to this day has been my biggest book ever, sales wise. So yeah, that's and you know what I have found through the years is that it's both mediums are so hard. So working in screenwriting is so hard. The form is hard, the competition is brutal, ruthless. And working in publishing is so hard for all the same reasons. And you use different parts of your brain to do either. So I don't think, I think if I had to put all my passion into screenwriting, I would go crazy. And if I had to put all my passion into novel writing, I would also go crazy. So this way, I keep a sort of weird balance in my life. I can't quite explain it except to say that.
Well, listening to you is reminding me of a show that I'm watching right now on Apple TV. It's called The Studio with Seth Rogen. Are you familiar with that?
Let me tell you, as somebody who's worked in the industry, it's perfect. It's actually watching that is like going to work. It's hilariously perfect. Um,
It's scary that it's accurate.
when I was married and my ex-husband actually did that job that Seth Rogen character, he was a producer for the studio. And I mean, he's brilliant. So he was nothing like this, goofy, gangling guy who screws up. But so I got quite the glimpse into that side of it, the studio side of it, from the true inside. And I can tell you that that show is perfect.
Well, it's quite revealing about all the different challenges involved in making art and getting it out to an audience. Um, and as I said, it's just kind of scary that all those things are going on behind the scenes. That when you sit down and watch a film, you don't know about all everything that went on to get it there.
No, it's true. And, all the sort of screw ups that can happen do happen. And also, the ego of everybody involved. And I'm not eliminating myself from that. When you, put your life into something and you're so passionate about it, the ego does take over. I'm not the worst of them, but I mean, dealing with all those egos and trying to massage everybody's ego and, you know, you call on someone for help and they give you help and then they're like, "You owe me," and you do. It's just perfect. The show's perfect. Another amazing show about which was also just like going to work was the show Episodes. I don't know if you remember that, but it was Matt LeBlanc basically playing himself
Hmm.
with Stephen Mangan, the great British writer and actor. It's anybody who wants to really see what producing television is like needs to look up the show Episodes.
Okay. Well, yeah, if it's anything like The Studio, I'll definitely check it out. Well, I want to wrap things up, but before we go, let's leave the final word with Cleopatra. You have a blog called Women, History, Sex, and Power. You talked about the research you were doing about those four women in Leonardo da Vinci's life. Can you speak a little bit more about the value, the importance of your work in highlighting these women in history?
But I think the importance of my work is that these women are not highlighted in history. And one of the, Leonardo's Swans was a runaway bestseller in Italy for this very reason that a famous art historian read the book and he wrote a masterful piece about it in Italy saying, she's brought these women back. They were so important. These women were patrons of the arts and, were very politically important at the time. And so history doesn't remember them. And so I'm sort of doing my best to remember them um, and make up for the hidden history. All women's history is hidden history, and I think that is now slowly being rectified by women's studies programs and that sort of thing. But I do want to mention that I have a new book coming out called Run, Darling, and it is remembering four other amazing women from more recent history, which are the Gabor sisters, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Eva, Magda, and their amazing over-the-top mother, Jolie. So a lot of us remember the Gabors as these glamour icons in the 20th century. I grew up with them because my grandmother, great-grandmother, and great aunt were their biggest fans. And so I grew up with the Gabors everywhere around me. But few people know that they were a Jewish family who barely escaped the Nazis during World War II. And their escape from Budapest was harrowing. And so I decided to write that book. And it's called Run, Darling, and it's going to be released on June 18th.
It's my birthday.
Hey, a great omen.
Yes. Run, Darling. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Sounds like another fascinating, important story. And Karen, you must be so busy. Congratulations on everything that you're doing, and congratulations on taking back the power, the freedom to make your art and to profit from it.
Oh, thank you so much. I just, in closing, would love to encourage all of your listeners to get in touch with me. I'm the most findable person around at karenessex.com, and on my website, you can find out everything you need to know about me. I mean, probably even my shoe size at this point. But please sign up for my newsletter because I do a monthly newsletter that I, try to give people advice that they can use and take forward in their own creative lives, and also let you know what's going on with my books, giveaways, contests, all kinds of fun things. So please get in touch.
Well, wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely be doing that. Well, Karen, thanks again, and congratulations on your re-release of this two-volume work of Cleopatra, and good luck with all the projects that you're involved in.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.